Here we go with the 2 Deep podcast, a football podcast as we break down everything in the NFL. Proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. You can find them online at gannasphalt.com. Much to cover today. The Ravens aren't opposed to drafting a quarterback. They had Anthony Richardson in for a visit. What do we think? Is this the right move? Is it just pressuring him into, he being Lamar Jackson, into a decision, or are they serious about maybe going another direction? How quickly do all these quarterbacks come off the board? How many of them, as we're now hearing even more quarterbacks in the first round? The Panthers are doing their due diligence. Who's the right pick, Bryce Young or C.J.Stroud? Jalen Carter's only talking to top 10 teams after his problems off the field. Is this a good idea or bad idea? John Elway no longer with the Broncos. What will his legacy be as an executive? Cardinals owner Michael Bidwell has been accused of cheating by former executive Terry McDonough. How dysfunctional have the Cardinals actually become? Is there any big ticket free agents still left on the market? We cover it all right now on the 2D podcast.
You're listening to the 2 Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. 2 Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at gannasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out gannasphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the 2 Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And welcome back as we break down the goings-ons around the NFL draft. It creeps ever closer. Free agency moves still looming out there. And, of course, I don't know, it hasn't reached, I don't think, Jeff, we would say, the level of the Aaron Rodgers drama, but the Lamar Jackson, saga continues to unfold, continues to be out there. I don't think any of us feel like it's going to be over before the draft, and I don't think the Ravens feel like it's going to be over before the draft. That's why they're starting to look at quarterbacks. What do you make of the fact that Anthony Richardson was in for a visit with the Baltimore Ravens? You think this is where they're looking to go, or is this just a scare tactic to try to get Lamar Jackson to the table?
Well, I think Anthony Richardson has to be very appealing to the Baltimore Ravens because he is, 6'4", 240 pounds, 4.4 speed, big arm. I mean, he can do a lot of things Lamar Jackson can do, and he's going to be a lot cheaper than Lamar Jackson is going to be for the next 4 or 5 years. But I imagine that they're trying to cover all the bases here. And look, there's been a lot of talk, at least I know at our place, at least some mock drafts have presupposed that there could be a trade between the Colts and the Ravens that would end up with Lamar Jackson going to Indy and the Ravens taking a guy like Richardson or somebody else. I don't know. That seems like folly right now. I think the Ravens want to have Lamar Jackson playing quarterback for them. They would love to have this go a lot faster. But, I mean, their whole offseason has been hamstrung by this. They haven't been able to do anything with their roster. And they've watched some good players leave, and they haven't been able to sign some guys who they would like to have back. So it's starting to reach a point now where they actually have to start thinking about what about the possibility of him holding out, about the possibility of somebody making him a deal that sounds enticing enough for us to go with somebody else. But yeah, I think it's more about them checking boxes and making sure they're in a position to do whatever they have to do to make sure they actually have somebody playing quarterback for them that they like next year.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's a little bit of covering their bases. Eric, yeah, is this a guy that they can even even get to, right? Like, is that just the smokescreen because Anthony Richardson's going to go far too high? What about the ideas? There are a lot of rumblings, as Jeff said. Folks here at his network, NFL Network, talking about the fact that the Colts could very much be in play and moving that number 4 pick as part of the equation. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think that's the one of the real possibilities for Lamar is the Colts. I think that Anthony Richardson, look, like you guys made fun of me and you were right. Last year with Malik Willis, like I took him at second and like he went in the 3rd round. So we've seen like the nth quarterback is always overrated right now, right? And whether like the real question we have to ask ourselves is N equal 3 or is N equal 4? Because if N equals 3, then Anthony Richardson's going to fall past Detroit at 6, past the Vegas Raiders at 7, kind of get to the Titans at 11 maybe. And Will Levis is going to go wherever the heck he goes. Or is N4 and Will Levis is the guy? Because if Will Levis is the guy, then I think then there really is impetus on the Colts. Because if it goes 1, Young or Stroud 2, and then Richardson going to Tennessee, Detroit, some other Raiders moving up to 3, then the Colts are stuck, playing musical chairs. I don't think much of Levis. I don't think the league thinks much of Levis. And so if it gets to that point where they're at quarterback 4, then I think there is a real chance for Lamar to go to the Colts.
Why do you just put it at like is 4 just a rule of thumb, or is we've had drafts where more than that have gone in the 1st round, or are you just saying that there's always one too many that are projected, and so the last guy's.
Well, I mean, look at the history. 2018, Lamar Jackson was N, right? And people were talking about Mason Rudolph going in round 1. Lamar Jackson barely made it in round 1. 2019, Drew Lock was supposed to be a 1st-round pick. He went at 42 to Denver. 2020, Jordan Love was supposed to be a top 15 to 20 pick. He goes to 26. 2021, Mac Jones falls to 15, even though people are mocking him at 3. And then last season, obviously, we had the Malik Willis thing. Like that last quarterback. Like, look, I'm not giving out betting advice anymore because I have some inside information on some of these things. But the safest bet in the NFL draft every single year is over quarterbacks in round 1, right? Under quarterbacks. I'm sorry. So like they set that number and it's always like, oh man, maybe I can get to 6 in round 1 of 18 if Mason Rudolph gets taken at 32 and it ends up being Lamar Jackson falling that far. Every single year there's one fewer quarterback than we all think. And the question is like, where's the index, right? Is the index Malik Hooker or is it Will Levis or is it Anthony Richardson? I tend to think it's Will Levis.
Yeah, it is interesting, Jeff, the way the quarterback position. I'm looking through some of the mock drafts. You guys have got a lot of them up there at NFL.com and where.
By the way, before I interrupt you, Soren, did you notice that Eric actually pulled a Petro and called Hendon Hooker Malik Hooker? I want to give you some love for that one. It's just
yes,
that's right.
Yes, Eric. Yes,
Hendon Hooker and I, by the way, same age.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'm looking because Hooker is on the rise, at least in some people's estimation on where it is. I just grabbed like Bucky Brooks' latest mock draft. And I'm seeing where he has the quarterbacks go. I get what you're saying, Eric, but I think if we looked back, I think you sought out the because you got burnt last year. You sought out drafts that mimic that. How many drafts do we have where we're like, I didn't see that guy going in the 1st round, where, everybody thought there was only going to be 2 and there ended up being a 3rd or a 4th.
When does that happen though? Like if you look at the betting markets.
I'll give you first of all, the betting markets haven't been up on the draft forever. Like there was no betting market.
Yeah, but like that's why
O'Brien came out of nowhere to be picked by the Jets. I probably going to go back and find that the Jets are always the team to do it.
Okay, and then the Holmes draft, the number was 3.5. That 4th guy was Deshaun Kaiser, win at like 52, right? Like if you look at the history, it's always that last quarterback goes in 2019. It was 3.5, and it went, Kyler, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins, and then Drew Lock. Like if you go back and look at the betting markets, it's always that straggling quarterback. Like the Jordan Love one, I think it depended upon where it ended up going, but like Jalen Hurts was the last quarterback there that people thought could go in round 1, and he went round 2. Like there always is one guy that falls further than everybody believes. And like again, the question is whether that guy, because the markets aren't. I got to look at the market. I think the market's 3.5. If you look at the markets, it's always that last guy. It's always under. It's always under.
Okay, and that's interesting. Is Anthony Richardson the guy who's on the bottom though, Jeff? I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have all of a sudden, listen, the physical tools are off the charts. I think people are starting to think that they can scheme again, right? Like, okay, we can scheme some guys open, and then 2, that they can develop guys. And we all hear the name that's being thrown around with Anthony Richardson. It's another guy who was big, physical, strong, had all the tools, but and played at Wyoming for crying out loud. So I mean, I don't know that Richardson's that you mentioned Will Levis. Levis has been in the top spot for a long time, and he also looks the part. Like if you're not going to take Bryce Young because he's not big enough, if that's really going to be a ding on him, and I think it's a legitimate ding, especially when you see Tua, then those 2 guys are not going to, one hit isn't knocking either one of those guys out. I mean, there's something to be said for being able to stand in there and being able to take some hits, particularly if you got to develop a guy.
Well, and Richardson, the thing that's exciting about him that excites pro scouts is just the speed, really. I mean, the mobility. I mean, you can do some things. You look at the guys who've been able to have success early in their careers who aren't named Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert. Most of these guys can move around. And so you look at the Kyler Murrays, the Josh Allens, that running ability is something that teams are a lot more willing, Jalen Hurts, are a lot more willing to accommodate now. So it's not just about, well, is this guy really polished and how many passes did he throw in the college level and can he, spin it at a tremendous rate? It's, can we build an offense around this guy and give him enough confidence until he can learn all the other stuff? And so that's where I think the separation between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson comes. But ultimately, Eric makes a good point. Like every year, there are teams trying to talk themselves into taking quarterbacks. And the buzz around the draft is always about, hyping these guys up. And I'm always fearful of dudes that I didn't really hear that much about in college. Like Will Levis was a good player, but it wasn't like, oh, this guy is the next big thing, or Anthony Richardson, the same thing. Good player. Nobody forecasting superstardom. I saw C.J.Stroud play in big games. I saw Bryce Young play in big games. And that stuff ultimately ends up mattering more than just how you test or what the scouts are saying about you right now.
Back to the Lamar Jackson part of the equation. I mean, if you're the Baltimore Ravens and you can flip, I mean, I know the draft compensation is 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson if you sign him to an offer sheet, and the Ravens can then, of course, match. But if they just wanted to move him, I mean, and you mentioned, Jeff, the people at your network talking about, the Colts would just it's 4 that they're at right now. Is 4 enough? Like if you're the Ravens, should be like, listen. I mean, I'm a big believer in once a guy says he doesn't want to be there. Once you get sideways, I don't know. Do you remember a time? I've asked this many times. You ever seen a time where player doesn't seem to want to be with team, and later on they sit around a fire strumming guitars singing Kumbaya? I haven't seen it. So if you get to that point, to me, you got to find the best extraction plan. And number 4 for him, and then flipping it on whichever quarterback's there, isn't a bad strategy, is it?
Not at all. I mean, that's why the Colts are such a sexy topic right now when it comes to Lamar Jackson, because they do offer something in this draft that should be appealing to the Ravens. And Eric said this many times, and I agree with him. The Ravens are a very smart organization, and they understand that even if they are able to work out something with Lamar Jackson, he probably is not going to be there after next year. They have to go. It's going to be a franchise tag. He'll play 1 year, and he'll probably end up going someplace else anywhere. So you probably need to start the process of what's life without him going to look like. And it already feels as if Lamar Jackson started that process. We can go down this road again about not having an agent and being on Twitter too much, but it just feels like now the draft coming, the Ravens are going to start sending out some signals that are a lot more telling about where they think this is going to end up with Lamar.
Yeah, Terry makes a good point. He says, hey, the Packers 2 years ago with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, that's probably the best example, but it hasn't. I mean, how well did it go? It's really 1 year ago that all this happened. They made it 1
people
year.
forget though, the 2021 draft, like we woke up that day and then Aaron Rodgers was getting traded that day. Like it's been there have been some, like Rodgers is one, Deebo Samuel last summer requested a trade. I mean, it happened.
Yeah, but I mean, where it really got sideways, and I think Terry brings up a good point. They lasted for a year, but what I want to point out to finish the thought is, it wasn't a good year for the Packers, and now they're ejecting right now, and we'll see. Deebo Samuel, that's not a bad one. I remember, I don't remember him being as, dramatic.
Cantankerous.
Yeah. But that's a pretty good one, Eric. I think that's a good call to find one.
But how many MVP quarterbacks in the last 10 years have moved on, have gotten sideways with their teams?
None.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a long list.
But like you look at the Ravens are a very calculated team. Eric DeCosta, EDC, every dollar counts is sort of the thing. And, it was a very unique situation, right? Because, Kyler Murray got a deal after 3 years. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz got a deal after 3 years. Obviously, the truly elite guys, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, got a deal after 3 years. Lamar won an MVP, but he's won it in an unconventional way. Like, people don't like to say that, and I love Lamar Jackson. I think he's fantastic. But when he rushed for 1,000 yards in 2019, over 2/3 of those yards were gotten by designed runs. When Michael Vick ran for 1,000 yards in 2006, over 2/3 of his yards were gotten on scrambles. So they were different. He's unlike any player that's ever played the position. The Ravens are a very calculated team. They don't have historical precedent for a player like Lamar. So there's a ton of uncertainty. They've played it like that. And Lamar without an agent has not met them anywhere. Neither group has met each other halfway on this. So it's a very unique situation, to your point, Petra, your initial question, where it's like, the answer is no. Like, we've never seen it like this, because Lamar's not a prick. Like, Lamar's not like Aaron Rodgers. Right? He's not like not a guy that's invented these things out of thin air the way that Aaron Rodgers has. But he's also not as good as like Aaron Rodgers, at the peak type of thing. So it's a very unique situation.
The 2D podcast is brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. By the way, they're hiring right now. If you're looking, they're hiring all positions. If you want to join one of the fastest growing companies in Kansas City, one of the best companies to work for, it's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Project managers, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour. Experience, based upon your experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com to see more information. The Panthers have a decision to make, Jeff, at the top. It seems like it's C.J.Stroud or Bryce Young. Stroud bigger, but still not as big as the other two guys we've talked about, Levis and Richardson. Bryce Young was the consensus number one coming in. Who's the right guy for the Panthers to go with?
C.J.Stroud. I mean, that Frank Reich played quarterback in the NFL, coached NFL quarterbacks for a long time, coached guys like Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz. C.J.Stroud looks a lot more like those guys in terms of size and ability than Bryce Young does. And I get everybody talks about Bryce Young like he's the Steph Curry of the NFL draft and all the things he can do and did in Alabama. I don't know. I think I've heard a lot about Alabama quarterbacks over the years, and they always end up disappointing me. And so I'm not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe this time. Another reference Eric will never get because he's too young to get to understand Beverly Hills Cop, but it's when you start thinking you've got something that's really good and it's not really what it is. And I think that's what Bryce Young is. I think he'll be okay. But if I'm Frank Reich and I'm on my second job and I'm looking at C.J.Stroud, who is, as most scouts will tell you, the best pocket passer in this draft, and obviously his accuracy and his feel for the game, I'm going with a guy who seems like less risk. And so that, I mean, they've made some good moves in Carolina. Yes. People they brought in there, Hayden Hurst and Thielen and Miles Sanders, good defense. You want a guy who can come in there and not be a gamble. I think C.J.Stroud is less of a gamble than Bryce Young.
Eager, who are you going with?
I'm going with Stroud. I think a lot of the things Jeff said are correct. I think that Stroud gives you the narrowest distribution in a good way and a bad way. Like, I think if things go really poorly for Stroud, he'll still be pretty respectable. I think if things go amazingly for Stroud, but they go amazingly for Young and Richardson, Young and Richardson will have better careers. Like, I think that it's very much so Stroud's the right pick in my opinion, because the NFC South is terrible. Derek Carr sucks. I don't know what Tampa Bay is doing. I don't know what the Falcons are doing, not going after Lamar. Like, you could win that division with Stroud in year one. I think the worry, though, is if you give up $200 million of assets, which is what the Panthers did, do you, and I say this the nicest way possible, do you go after a guy who is kind of Kirk Cousins-like?
You're calling Stroud Kirk Cousins-like?
Kirk Cousins, and I say this nicely, Kirk Cousins on rookie deal money is a Super Bowl quarterback. If you could somehow find Cousins for $10 million, that's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. That's a very good investment.
Yeah, I think you missed Jeff's question though. Who are you calling Cousins?
Stroud.
Okay.
I think Stroud is my issue with Stroud. He's incredibly accurate. I think people dig his mobility when in reality they just didn't ask him to run a lot. I think that, he's a better runner than we give him credit for, but he's a little stiff. He's a little bit mechanical in the pocket the way that Cousins is. And to me, that limits his ceiling a little bit, but he is the best of the prospects, in my opinion.
I think there's a couple of things. One, I don't like how good a runner is he? Do we think? I mean, do we know? You can think it, but how much do we know?
Stroud?
Yeah.
Or Young? I've never seen him run that much.
That's where I'm at. Like, I think there's this perception that like other Ohio State quarterbacks have been on the run. I wanted to look here at this year: 47 rushes, 108 yards, no touchdowns for Stroud. So I mean, he's
But they had their two left tackles were like sumo wrestlers, like they didn't, and their wide receivers were open all day, so he didn't have to run. The concern about Stroud is that those two tackles at Ohio State have wingspans that would make like Charles Barkley blush, and their wide receivers were always amazing. Like, we have not seen him without support.
And isn't that
also the reason he didn't have to run for his life?
Yeah, by the way, the year before, 32 carries for negative 20 yards. They put sacks into the rushing category. So that dings him more. So don't think about that in terms of quarterback NFL numbers, because the college does it differently. But he's definitely not a runner, or has not been a runner to this point. And I think that's one of the things. Like, you're getting a guy to pass. And who is Peter Drop at the quarterback position from Ohio State? Ever. And who has really outperformed any kind of expectation or outperformed their draft position? Who's outperformed their draft position as a quarterback from an Urban Meyer offense? This is Ryan Day has taken it and moved forward. But I mean, even Alex Smith had a fine career, but he did not live up to 1-1. I don't know that he lived up to 110. If he'd have gone later in the first round. Now, part of that's, and I'm not just talking about because Aaron Rodgers ended up being a lot better. I'm just talking about Alex Smith's career is fine. It's a good, solid NFL career. But who in Urban Meyer's offense has come out a bit like, there's always bushels of talent. Everybody, you ask scouts, they will tell you. Scouting Alabama and to a lesser extent Ohio State, but really Alabama is the glaring example. You don't know. And look, LSU was like this a couple of years ago, right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire was this guy. Are you watching a guy that's really talented, or is he just running free because everyone around him is so good that, he's getting environments that you will never see in the NFL because everybody else is good? And that's the question about that. That's what Ohio State quarterbacks have been, products of the talent around them and the scheme. And Stroud's got to buck that to be the number one guy. Do you believe he's the number one guy? Like, would he be the number one guy? Where would he have gone in the Patrick Mahomes class?
Stroud?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, Trubisky.
Well, Trubisky went too, so that kind of jacks things up, right?
Trubisky sucked, and he went too, and they traded up to get him, which meant other people were trying to get to him. I mean,
I think we look back.
Well, he would have been a first-round pick.
Where would he have gone, though?
I think he would have gone ahead of Mahomes or Watson. I mean, there were real concerns about Mahomes' footwork. There were real concerns about Mahomes' whether he could win. All bull crap in hindsight, but like Mahomes is closer to this Anthony Richardson guy, right? Than he was. And Watson had. I mean, there's a scout who works in the league now who I trust who said Watson had like a 4 out of 10 arm, and that's why he fell. I mean, Petro, who's your one then?
I think my point is that like these guys are more a product of how the wind blows from year to year at the position.
Well, of course,
right? Because I think if you took this year, if you took the 2017 quarterback class and put it this year, they'd go like 1, 2, 3 for sure. 1, 2, 3. Trubisky, Mahomes, Deshaun Watson would have gone 1, 2, 3. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think the recent performance of young quarterbacks has people saying, I have to get my young quarterback, right? We hit a stretch there. We were on a stretch where it was still Rivers and it was Manning and it was Brady and it was all these old guys. And it's like, I don't know. Do we want a young guy? And even the Saints were winning with a guy that they got off the free agent market. I think right now, because some young guys have hit, the assumption is there's another wave. There's another wave. That's what we were all talking about a year or two ago. Look at this wave of young quarterbacks. How's it look now? It's not that impressive anymore, right? It's really Mahomes, it's Burrow, it's Allen, and who else is it?
Herbert? Yeah, but that's also because you have to account for more of a learning curve. Like you're not getting guys who are coming in as well versed in NFL football. They've thrown a lot of passes, but playing an NFL level style of game where there's more athletes on the field and more complicated coverages, like you're going to have like ups and downs with a lot of these guys. I think it's easier to evaluate where these guys are going to be at after year 6 or 7. But unfortunately, yeah, you're talking about dudes right now who are having to play right away and having to play different styles. I mean, Aaron Rodgers wasn't even playing until year 4. We've seen
Patrick Mahomes had an apprenticeship year, but then started and went 5,050 and won the MVP.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert started and was God's gift to the quarterback position his rookie year. Lamar Jackson took over in the second half of his rookie year, led the Baltimore Ravens into the playoffs. There's some recency that says you can step in and go now, right? Like Josh Allen's the one that I think has Anthony Richardson and Will Levis on the board because they're going big, strong, all the things. We'll teach him to play the quarterback position, right?
Yeah. By the way, since we started talking, under 4.5 quarterbacks has gone from -180 to -190, which I just think we're moving markets over here, fellas. And then the other one, Tommy said, no, Eric. Mahomes at 41-7 when he ended. Yes, in Mahomes' first year when he started for Texas Tech, he had 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So when you actually have to compare them in the years they actually started, because if we gave Richardson 2 more years at Florida, who knows what he would do. This is called being honest about the conversation. The thing about Richardson, which was, I mean, the thing about Richardson is like everybody sees sort of the potential with the legs, of course, but there is that issue with the arm and the support that, people are imagining things. I don't think he can go 1 though, because I don't think you can give up $200 million in assets for a guy whose floor can't play. Like that's going to be really tough.
I'm looking this up. What was the age? Patrick Mahomes, when he played his freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And he was 19, 20, and 21. Because I know he was 21 when he was 21 when he got to the Chiefs, and I think his birthday's in August. So I think he might have been drafted at 20. Am I right? Trying to find his birthday.
Yeah, Mahomes was a 57% completion guy with 16 touchdowns as a freshman, and then he played 2 more years, and as Tommy said, got a lot better for sure. That he didn't properly state the touchdown interception ratio, but that's fine. And the Richardson, of course, sat last year behind. I can't remember who was starting. Was it? Last year was his first year as a starter, and like those statistics were similar. And again, college statistics do not translate from NFL to so it's about traits, and these teams look at the traits, and the traits for Richardson, according to a lot of scouts, are pretty damn good.
And to your point, Eric, Anthony Richardson is 20 years old right now. He's born May 22nd, 2000.
I mean,
so he'll be 21. So he is playing a year older.
Yeah.
Right, Mahomes. So at the same age, Mahomes was definitely better. Right.
Sure, but in the same year starting in college, they were about the same.
What will the analytics say is more important? Age? Is performing at a younger age an important distinction?
Age is certainly a variable that goes in.
It's giant. It's giant. And now 1 year, I'm not gonna quibble over, but I'll say this. I get the comparison. I think it's a good one. Well, I think Mahomes to me, the one thing that Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech proved was when guys start talking to you about footwork, tell them to shut up. Okay, because footwork is what I think scouts start chirping about when they don't really know what they see in a guy. Because the footwork,
they don't really know why things go awry, right?
His footwork was not what they wanted to be at Texas Tech. It's not what they wanted to be with the Chiefs, and nobody says boo about it. He doesn't make any conventional throws because he doesn't have to, because he has arm talent. And people just took the history of the offense, which is what I'm doing with C.J.Stroud, which to me, that would be the rebuttal back to somebody who says, I'm not taking the Ohio State quarterback, is you're doing nothing more than saying air raid quarterback, Patrick Mahomes won't work, when you say Ohio State quarterback won't work, right? Like, and I would be like, valid point. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, but there also was, when you have Andy Reid, who's changing the offense to accommodate you, you're having Alex Smith there to help you grow. I mean, there are a lot of things that help Patrick Mahomes. Sure. We write history with him, but I know people who said, yeah, when he showed up here, they had to do a lot of work with his mechanics to get him right. So if he goes to some place like, I don't know, Atlanta or some place like that and gets coached badly, maybe he's not even in the league now. It's a lot of it is getting in the right place. That's why I say Frank Reich is a good person to have coaching you, and he's not going to take somebody he thinks is going to be a gamble. And he's going to take the best option for him based on measurables. That's what I think.
Oh, I get.
By the way, Josh Allen completed 56% of his passes for 16 touchdowns as a junior at Wyoming. I know that there's weather effects and you have to do all that kind of stuff, but I think that the issue is, and the reason we're all, Soren's going to Ohio State, and that makes a lot of sense. I'll turn around on Bryce Young and say, what Alabama quarterback is, quote, pissed to drop in the league after Joe Namath, et cetera, et cetera. And same with Florida. When's the last time? Kyle Trask sucks. Who's the last Florida quarterback to do anything real? Yeah. But I think the point is let's talk about environments here. The environment for Anthony Richardson to go to is Seattle or Detroit, a place where there's a quarterback there that is good enough that if, much like Alex Smith, if Mahomes would have gotten to Kansas City and been terrible, none of us would have known, because Alex Smith would have just kept playing. And that, if Anthony Richardson goes to Detroit and Ben Johnson, who I think is one of the best up-and-coming play callers, can't get it out of him, then he probably stinks. But Jared Goff's good enough, and that roster, Jeff doesn't want to hear this, but that roster's good enough to waste the 6th pick and move everything forward. I don't think Anthony Richardson could go somewhere and run for it. And it was the same thing with Tim Tebow. When Tim Tebow got to Denver, it was very clear the guy had to break down his whole throwing motion for years, much like some other guys. And they played him right away, and he just kept playing the bad habits, and he never got better because he kept playing. A guy like Anthony Richardson has got to go somewhere and work out the bad habits in a low-stakes environment.
Just because I'm the kind of guy who can't let it go, I will say that Bart Starr, Ken Stabler, and David Woodley, 2 of which won, 3 Super Bowls.
All those guys played before Tracy Simeon, though, Petro.
They were all Alabama quarterbacks. They were all Alabama quarterbacks that played in, 2 of them winning Super Bowls. Mac Jones and Richard Todd would certainly qualify as pissing at least a drop. Maybe not many drops, maybe not a full stream, but they would qualify as pissing a drop from Alabama. So there is a difference between Alabama and Ohio State quarterbacks, just to be clear. Jalen Carter, only talking to 10 teams. I get the idea, hey, I ain't falling farther than this, so you're the only ones to talk to me. That's great. Good idea, bad idea.
Bad idea. And I get why they're doing it. They're trying to rebrand him. He's had a rough 4 months here with this charge in Georgia. what he was almost 10 pounds overweight at his pro day, didn't do anything at the combine. Like Drew Rosenhaus is an agent. He's trying to sell, hey, look, it's all about what you see on tape. And so I think they're rolling the dice here. And I don't know. I mean, I could see him being top 10, but I could also see him dropping out of the top 10 just because there are some good players and some good defensive players in there. And the teams you're relying on, the Bears, for example, I guess you can take an offensive tackle. The Lions, I could see them, depending on who's left there, taking someone like Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson. I mean, you're kind of betting on some things falling in your way that you look at the amount of teams that would be available to make that kind of move. I think the Eagles at 10 could easily go with an offensive player.
Yeah.
I think it's a risk.
Yeah, Eric, what do you think? I had Mike Sando on today. He said he doesn't get to 6, right? Like he doesn't know where he'll go, but he doesn't get to 6. That was his prediction on Carter. What do you think? Does this hurt him only talking to teams picking in the top 10?
It's bold. I mean, also, like we've seen Minkah Fitzpatrick get traded. We've seen C.J. Henderson get traded. We've seen I'm trying to think. We've seen a lot of guys that were drafted really high that got traded within a first. Like, do you really want to cut off your opportunities to other teams in the NFL so quickly in your career? Like, I think it's really silly. And it's like my other thing, and I got to be honest, like, what else do these guys have to do right now? Like what is the opportunity? Yeah. Like, what if Kansas City said, hey, come and visit? You're like, nah, you're picking 31. It's like, what else are you doing? Right? Like, if you're truly a good kid, or you're charming or whatever, like working with these teams is only going to benefit you. And this second contract, like, what happens if you don't get a second contract from your first team? Like, all these guys can be like, oh, he's a prick, and we're going to be like, second contract, be like, oh, Jalen Carter had a halfway decent rookie contract. Why didn't anybody want to sign him? And we're going to look back at today and be like, well, that's why. Because
it's a mistake because you're already labeled as kind of a pain in the ass with all the different things you've been in. So why now be like, I'm going to dictate to you how it's going to be? You look like a guy who's going to be uncoachable. But the flip side is talent trumps all. Warren Sapp, weed, we know nobody worries about weed anymore. I think he had a marijuana positive test was his thing that knocked him down on draft day. And I got plenty of folks that I've talked to that are pissed about, the Jets take it was not Anthony Beck, Penn State tight end they took over.
Kyle Brady.
Kyle Brady over Warren Sapp, right? Like didn't.
The Vikings took Derek Alexander over Warren Sapp. They could have played Warren Sapp and John Randall together.
My point being though that Warren Sapp got dinged on draft day. He slid down. He should have been a top 5 pick. It didn't burn the Bucs. Can anyone name the guy? Like Randy Moss slid. It didn't burn the Vikings. Like, who got burnt?
You've had Matt Collar on your show. He's also, he's guested for Jeff once on the show before. He says always draft the weed guy. Always draft the weed guy.
Oh, well, yes, and now it's no problem. How about this? Marcus Peters, Henry Ruggs.
I mean, Peters was a great Chief.
But he's been around. He has been given up on by a couple of teams.
He had 2 teams that traded for him.
I don't remember the Ruggs.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's are you talking about guys who were getting dinged for character stuff?
I mean, he's right. It blew. I mean, the Ruggs situation
was Ruggs getting dinged for that?
It didn't well, but I don't remember a character question on him coming out of Alabama. I might have missed it, but Justin Houston's another one that worked. Right? Nick brings up Justin Houston. He slid probably from the 2nd to the 3rd round because of, again, marijuana was the situation with Justin Houston. That worked. So I think teams will look at that. Laramie Tunsil. I'm getting a lot on the guy slid and he ended up being good. I'm not getting much on it. So I think teams, I don't think he goes below 5. I still think it's a bad move to not interview, but I don't think he goes below 5. I don't think he makes it past the Seahawks. That just seems like in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting. I mean, people like Tyree Wilson a lot. I was at their pro day in Texas Tech, and this is agent talk. Where the agent was talking about, people were telling him top 5. And so at some point, to Eric's point earlier, it's just the quarterbacks will dictate where all these guys end up. If you end up getting 4 quarterbacks in the top 5, he's not going to be a top 5 player because Will Anderson is going to be up there and Tyree Wilson will be in there, and there's going to be competition.
Lance Zierlein had your boy Tyree Wilson, going number 2.
Yeah.
On your network, and he used to. I think he still does live in Houston, and used to cover the.
There's a radio show in Houston.
Yeah, so whether that's inside info or not, or he's just taking a swing at it, but yes, that could push. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that pushes him down if he and Anderson, 3 quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks, maybe does get to 7. But I don't know. Jalen Carter is the best defensive lineman in this draft.
Yeah.
And so I think that's tough to see him sliding very far. We're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994 with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, plus every project coming with a written warranty. Why wouldn't you call them right now? Gann Asphalt and Concrete, 816-484-3338, online at gannasphalt.com. Let's talk a little bit about John Elway leaving the Broncos. What's the legacy of John Elway, the executive, Jeff?
Oh, it's complicated. You got to give him credit for winning a championship. That trumps everything, but a lot of swings and misses there, especially, you wonder what happens if he doesn't talk Peyton Manning into coming to town and obviously playing great football for them. I think like a lot of great players, he had the problem of never being able to really identify guys who played his position and draft and develop them well. I think he got smart down the stretch when Peyton Manning was declining and decided, let's go play defense, run the football, and win a championship doing that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately, I think he was an okay executive who got really lucky with a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah. Eric, what's your view?
I mean, I think it took some guts to move on from Tim Tebow when they made the playoffs, beat a storied franchise in the Steelers. He's very popular. I think in hindsight, of course, it was the right move, easily the right move. From there, he made, it was decision after decision. Paxton Lynch, Drew Lock. Then it was, a patchwork thing to try to keep it all together. But you make the right move on Peyton Manning, you win a Super Bowl. I think you deserve a little bit of praise. Much better as a player than an executive, but not a disaster as an executive.
I think the fact that he's able to bring Peyton Manning on board, the fact that he could talk quarterback to that guy, he brought the championship there, right? And I think he deserves credit for that. But is he the guy that's the long-term answer? No. And when there wasn't a veteran to woo, right guy, right time, right place, it made it happen, and he deserves credit for that. He doesn't need to be run down, but like one of the great executives in football, is he Ozzie Newsome? No. He's not Newsome. That's for damn sure. The Cardinals owner, Michael Bidwell, accused of cheating by former executive Terry. I got to remember McDonough. Yeah, I got to remember his brother. How his brother says Sean McDonough. As I look at it, I want to say McDonough. Terry McDonough. Listen, this is just the latest in what's going on with the Cardinals. How much of a mess is it in Arizona, Jeff?
It's a disaster right now, and it's one more thing that they couldn't afford to have come out. And I've had people tell me the owner hates the quarterback. The quarterback wasn't talking to the coach last year. The coach wasn't talking to the owner at different points. Certainly, the general manager Steve Keim, who's no longer there, who I've known for a long time, just disappeared. Just took a leave of absence and never came back. And so, it's a dumpster fire right now, and I don't know how it can get better. I mean, some of the stuff he's alleging, McDonough is alleging in these claims are really talking about using burner phones to talk to Steve Keim when he was on leave for drunk driving. It's
what was it? Aggravated drunk driving? It was like something. It was like it was
also domestic violence. There's just like every bad check mark. It was bad bingo, right? Like I think it's so bad there. Like a couple people I talked to, I got this confirmed by a couple people. the agent for Jonathan Gannon told him not to take the job.
Oh.
And like, I think all of us would be like, yeah, well, I'm going to take the millions, right? Like that makes sense. But I know, there were 2 GM jobs open this year, Titans and Cardinals. And it wasn't exactly like a rush by up and coming people to go after that Cardinals job. I'll just say that.
Yeah. No, I don't understand how this, to me, what this says to me is, look, we had, we have what's going on in Washington, and, I think it shows how the owners are going to circle the wagons. Right. And I think the most troubling part about this, and we'll see if it comes out, is the word that, McDonough's alleging that he was blackballed by the rest of the league. If that ends up being the case, if it's like, listen, I did nothing wrong, my owner's telling me to do something wrong, and when I try to do what's right, I'm out, I'm blackballed by the league.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the rest of the league that imposes. That, to me, is the part that's the scariest. Like, there's no doubt. Jeff's right. Arizona's a dumpster fire. But I think the league's got a big PR issue if it's like the league won't hire anybody who did the right thing when it was against an owner. Right. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
That leads them down a road of many more problems with other things. Leads them down the road of problems with their players when they try to get things square with them. They're like, listen, you're blackballing your own executives. That to me is where this could end up being. Right now it looks like, okay, Arizona's a hot mess. Well, it ain't in my yard. Right. It's not next door to me. So what do I care? For the other 31 teams and the fans of the other 31 teams, like, what should I care? It's like, well, if these are the kind of the dynamics of the league, if it carries forward to that point, it's a league issue, right? It's a league that maybe is beginning to, smell a little bit like a dumpster fire.
Yeah, and this is a guy. It's kind of too in the weeds for this audience. This is a guy who really was on the radar of, had it on the road to being a general manager. When that team was going right, when back when Arians was still there, they had a lot of good things going for them, and he was a guy whose name came up a lot in GM searches, and he just vanished. So there is probably some merit to his claims of, like, my career went off the rails for something.
Right. All right, let's wrap with this. Is there a free agent as we look? The big ones have been taken off the board. Is there a free agent that's out there that you think could still make a significant impact on a team? Eric, you want to take the lead on this one? You got a guy that fits the bill that you think, okay, this is a guy that's flying under the radar right now, but he can still do big things?
I said this a little bit. I said this last time. You talk about Clowney, you talk about Beckham. Here's a guy that I really did like when he was coming out of Kansas State, and a guy, like, doesn't play a premium position. He did not play great compared, when he was with Denver. I think Dalton Reisner is a player that can improve an offensive line, and I think he's going to come at a relatively inexpensive price. I think he's one of those where, like, I loved his Kansas State analytics. Like, when, he was one that I really, I thought that it was a great pick for Denver. Didn't ultimately work for them. I think he's going to be a pretty good player for the next team that signs him.
All right, Jeff, you got somebody?
Yannick Ngakoue. And I'm surprised he doesn't have a job yet, because he's under 30 and he's been productive everywhere he's been. And for some reason, he just doesn't have a market right now. And so, yeah, I think that, he's been good in Indianapolis. He was good with the Raiders. Edge rushers are always at a premium. I think whoever signs him is going to get a nice deal out of him, because he's going to have to take probably a better minimum to play.
Yeah. I being local here in Kansas City, Dalton Reisner was another one that I like, and I think he's a quality teammate and all those kind of things. I'm big on that, but I'll go another direction. I'm puzzled why Kenny Golladay is getting such the blackball. He put up good numbers in Detroit with a team that it wasn't like it was a great passing offense. We didn't do anything in New York. I mean, great. The quarterback threw 15 touchdowns. Like, I'm still baffled by the fact that the Giants gave all that money to Daniel Dimes, but I don't understand. Kenny Golladay, to me, is worth a flyer, and I think a 1-year prove-it deal to Kenny Golladay could pay big returns. Or am I missing the boat?
No,
he needs
yeah. Go ahead,
He
Eric.
needs a quarterback with no filter like Stafford. Right. The reason why he didn't do well in New York is because Daniel Dimes is kind of Alex Smith-like, right? Where when's the last time when we watched Alex Smith play for 5 years in Kansas City? When's the last time he threw to a guy who was covered?
Well, and that's why to me, all the winning teams, all the teams with quarterbacks should have an interest in the guy.
Yeah.
Pedigree there. He's not that old. And, dinging a guy for not being able to catch balls from Daniel Jones, I'm not dinging him for that. I just set that off to the side and say, okay, let's call those 2 injury-plagued years and let's give it a go.
Maybe he's a Chief. You never know.
He would be a good fit there. I think he could play a
Eric's
lot
not
like,
buying it.
like
They don't. Patrick Mahomes does not throw to covered guys. He just does not.
and Galladay has no separation anymore.
He was not a separating guy when he was with Detroit. He was a great contested guy. Like, I think he should go to LA and play with Stafford, the guy that gave him 1,000-yard years in Detroit. Like, Stafford has no filter. He'll throw to a guy who's covered.
So will Patrick Mahomes. And maybe he will throw. Oh, Patrick Mahomes will do it. He'll take it sidearm. He'll bring it around. Not act like. Listen, he'll throw guys open when they'll run towards the ball. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is still trying to figure that out. But I think he's a guy.
Stray that guy every single episode.
He did. So. He did get a stray. Maybe that's not fair. But I will give anybody a shot with a good quarterback. I never call would DeAndre Hopkins be more open in Kansas City than he was in Arizona? Yes, because the play caller's better. The quarterback's everybody's better with a better coach, better scheme, and better quarterback when you play the wide receiver position. So
I feel what you're saying. I would just say I think that Mahomes, like, when's the last time Mahomes threw a back shoulder ball to it? Like, that was Galladay's life in Detroit, was back shoulder stuff, and he was great at it. I just don't know. Yeah, I mean, if he's making $1 million, who the heck cares? Bring him in. But, I think that I just wouldn't have high expectations for him.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We get closer and closer, more and more draft coverage as we get closer to the draft here on the Too Deep. Remember, our podcast brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com if you want to work for one of the fastest growing companies. They're hiring right now for all positions. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the 2D podcast.